Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm going to wish a happy VE Day to South Africa. And while several countries did fight for the liberation of Europe in World War II from Nazi fascism and Italian imperialism, I'm going to focus on South Africa because South Africa is largely a forgotten ally in World War II. And that is for a number of reasons, but the main two reasons is, number one, the current government of South Africa, the African National Congress, wants to minimize any achievements that white South Africans have made throughout the history of South Africa. That's number one. And that's still going on to this day. Number two, the government before 1994 with the National Party, which ruled between 1948 and 1944, had covered up a lot of South Africa's involvement in World War II because they had a pro-Nazi ideology after World War II, not during World War II, which is what I'm going to talk about. And that many of the South Africans that did volunteer to fight for South Africa in World War II were not anti-Semites. They were critical of anti-Semitism, and they were critical of racism. Many South African World War II veterans actually formed the first anti-apartheid organization known in South Africa, and that was called Torch Commando. Now, okay, let's go ahead and talk about that. Okay, South Africa... the Prime Minister of South Africa was at the time was a man by the name of Jan Smuts, and he became Prime Minister only by a few votes in Parliament. And due to a lot of heavy pro-Nazi ideologies within the National Party, Jan Smuts realized that South Africa had to have an all-volunteer force in World War II. It was an all-volunteer. They knew they could not conscript people because even with the volunteer force, they called a fifth column in their army trying to overthrow the commanding generals and the government. But the majority of the South Africans wanted Jan Smuts as their prime minister, and actually it wasn't majority all white South Africans of English descent. It was about 60% Afrikaner, 40% English South Africans, or South Africans of English ancestry, of the white South Africans that fought. There were black, Indian, and colored veterans of World War II, now occasionally they did see combat, but it wasn't very much due to, even though it wasn't as harsh as apartheid, there was racial discrimination practices at that time. So where they saw action was limited due to the Jan Smuts government. Now, with that being said, Jan Smuts also was one of the earliest proponents of the State of Israel, which helped relocate Jews to Israel after World War II, and he was really touched by the Holocaust and also by the massacre in Nanjing, China. And Jan Smuts had also renounced a lot of his racist practices right before he died, and that's been proven. And actually, Jan Smuts, deputy prime minister after World War II, believed that majority rule was the right way to go. But that's okay. So, and actually, the Dutch Reformed Church, which was largely a pro-Nazi organization, they would not give service to the South African soldiers that were in uniform fighting for the Allies. That is a true story as well. So they faced a lot of flack at home, many of the South African soldiers that chose to fight for the Allies in World War II. But they persevered, and they fought very bravely, and they fought very gallantly. And Adolf Malan fought in the Battle of Britain, and he changed the flying formation for a lot of the Royal Air Force Spitfires, which helped the Royal Air Force win the Battle of Britain. And Adolf Malan was nicknamed Churchill's favorite Afrikaner, Winston Churchill's favorite Afrikaner. And 23 South Africans fought in the Battle of Britain, which was a very decisive battle in World War II. 23 South African pilots fought in the Battle of Britain. 9 of them were killed in action. The South African Air Force also participated in the Warsaw Uprising. The Warsaw Uprising, the South African bombers were flying low in Warsaw to drop supplies to Jews who had escaped concentration camps that were forming an underground resistance, and Polish citizens forming an underground resistance against against the Nazi occupiers. That went on as well, and unfortunately several South African pilots had lost their lives flying very low to ground but trying to deliver supplies in a very efficient manner. But unfortunately the Warsaw Uprising was crushed by the Nazis, but it was not the sacrifice of the South African Air Force pilots were not in vain in that. And they also were the majority of the force that, or a if not the majority, a very close majority to the force that liberated Ethiopia from Italian rule. The South African Air Force was the majority Air Force, and the South African Army was a large percentage of the ground forces that came in and liberated Ethiopia. Ethiopia was occupied by Italian forces from 1936 to 1941. Now, it is largely unrecognized because many Ethiopians were able to get out of Addis Ababa, the capital, and flee to the mountains. So Ethiopia did not have the scars of colonialism that other African countries have had. But nevertheless, they were under imperial Italian control for 5 years, and the South African Army and Air Force helped liberate it. The South African, despite the Italian pilots having advantages in experience and the quality of airplanes, the South African pilots defeated the Italian Air Force in the majority of the engagements they had over Ethiopia. Also, South African Army fought in the North African campaign and the battles of Tobruk and several other engagements against the Nazi forces. And I've read a book on South African prisoners of war in World War II. And when they got back, they were given a reasonable welcome by the citizens that supported South Africa fighting for the Allies. But in 1948, Jan Smuts's political party was defeated by maybe not even 1,000 votes. It may even be by a few hundred votes. It was a very narrow election where Jan Smuts's party was defeated, but they were defeated in 1948, and that's when the harsh policy called apartheid developed. The racial segregation policy, like the very, very harsh racial segregation policy of apartheid. And like I said, South Africa is largely a forgotten ally due to political reasons. The far left tries to shut them up because they were white, and then the far right tries to shut them up because they fought for the Allies and not for the Nazis. And I both think that's very silly reasons, and that what the South Africans did in World War II, because Battle of Britain was a key battle, and Adolf Malan, a South African Air Force pilot, was a huge reason why the South African Air Force won. Why the Allied Air Forces won the Battle of Britain. And and the Warsaw Uprising was a valiant effort by the South African military doing what they did, and they flew low to the ground. They fought as valiantly and bravely as they could. And then the South African military is a large reason why Ethiopia was liberated from Italian imperialism. So anyways, hope everybody's doing well. Take care. God bless them. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.